I am Thor Jurgensen, city editor of the Daily Item. We are honored today to have with us Swampscott resident and Army Colonel Michael Feiner. Welcome, sir, and thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you very much for having me, Thor.
You're welcome. You will be speaking at tomorrow's Veterans Day ceremony or commemoration in Veterans Memorial Auditorium in Lynn at 11 o'clock. Would you please tell us a bit about yourself, sir, and your service to our country?
Well, thank you for having me again, Thor. And I was commissioned as an Army officer from Boston University in 1987. I had a scholarship to Babson College. And since 1987 in my commissioning, I've served in a variety of assignments over the years in the reserves and National Guard, and I've been deployed several different times to different operations, to include Hurricane Katrina in downtown New Orleans, to Iraq, sort of in western Baghdad, at Camp Cropper, and a variety of domestic operations such as the Springfield tornado, Hurricane Irene, and a variety of snowstorms over the years. As way of background, I grew up in Sharon, sort of on the south, and moved to the North Shore in the mid-90s. I currently live in Swampscott, and as I mentioned earlier before we were on camera, my mother lives in Lynn, so I'm in Lynn quite a bit.
Tell us a little more, please, about your service, especially your deployments, and if you would, tell us also from the perspective of a veteran, what does Veterans Day mean to you?
Absolutely. Probably the longest deployment I was on was as the commander of the 1st Battalion, 181st Infantry. So in 2007, they took the 1st Battalion, 181st Infantry, and we broke it into multiple parts. Some parts of the unit were sent into the Green Zone to provide security in Baghdad, and my headquarters and some other personnel in my unit were sent to Camp Cropper in Iraq, which was the successor to the Abu Ghraib prison. So they had a detention center on Camp Cropper and a forward operating base, and my unit was responsible for the security and the logistics and other mayoral duties of that facility, amongst other things. So we deployed our National Guard soldiers from the Commonwealth to Fort Dix, New Jersey, then to Kuwait, and then to West Baghdad, Camp Cropper, the Victory Base Complex, and we served in 2007, 2008 there, sort of during the surge. It was sort of an interesting time in Iraq. We had what we consider a successful deployment. Then we came back and resumed our civilian lives.
Let me ask you, as a veteran, what does Veterans Day mean to you? What will tomorrow's significance hold for you, beyond the obvious?
Well, Veterans Day is definitely one of the most important holidays to me and to my children and to my family, because it's the one time of year that we get to really commemorate and spend time with our fellow soldiers and airmen, sailors, Marines, Coast Guard personnel, and then we get to reflect on all of the people who went before us that really built the foundation that we get to take advantage of today. Because we couldn't do what we're doing today without all of the veterans of the past and all of the families and civilians who have supported us in the past.
You mentioned your family. Spouses, children make an enormous sacrifice for someone serving in the military and someone deployed overseas. Could you talk a little about that, please?
That's definitely the biggest stressor, without question, for me, at least. In hindsight, I think it's been a good experience for my children because they had to become very resilient. They don't know when you're being deployed, whether it's a short deployment for a snowstorm, whether it's Hurricane Katrina for a month, or whether it's a deployment overseas. And sometimes you really can't give them every detail, so they get worried every time they watch TV. I know my kids were younger. My son was 7 or 8, and my daughter wasn't even a teenager when I was in Iraq. And every time they watch television, they became concerned because they don't know who is getting hurt. And the media sometimes focuses on those issues. Who's getting killed, who's getting wounded. They're not focusing necessarily on the other part. So it is very stressful to children, but at the same time, they become part of the team that helps us successfully deploy, because they get stronger, certainly throughout the deployment, if it's handled properly.
The Air Force colonel who commands Hanscom Air Force Base told a group of Lynn students last Friday, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said 1% of America's population serves in the military, and the way he put it was carries the other 99% on its back. What do those words mean to you, and can you expand on them from your own perspective, please?
I think, statistically that probably is about right, in the sense of, very few people serve in active duty, the reserves or the National Guard in this day and age. And in a way, that's the strength of our country, because we have a volunteer force. And at the same time, it's incumbent upon the people who do serve to try to integrate into society like we're doing today, to explain what we're doing on behalf of our country. Because there isn't a time like World War II where, let's say, 10% of the population may have had some service, whether it was civilian or military, and every family was touched. This day and age, as the colonel sort of, I think, was implying, very few people are directly associated with the military. So it's hard sometimes for everyone else to get a feeling for what that entails or what that means. So as part of the National Guard, it's very important for us to integrate with our civilian counterparts and in communities and families. And I think one of the big differences that's happened in this generation versus the last generation is that during the Vietnam War, it was sort of an active duty war. It was a draft system. This war, the war on terror, has been a total military fight, where you've had not only active duty personnel, but we've had reserves and National Guardsmen. So someone in the community of Swampscott or Lynn, like myself, can come and say, we've been part of these operations, and relay our histories and stories to everyone else.
Tell me to what degree you feel younger people have an understanding of veterans' sacrifices and really understand the history of this country and the sacrifices veterans have made. Upwards of a dozen different veterans programs in our readership area will be held through tomorrow. Many of them revolve around schools. If you could speak to that, please.
It's interesting. I think information is actually pretty good for this generation, because we've had the longest war of our lifetimes, or maybe even for American history, and it's so well publicized, and because the wars are being fought by units from communities like the National Guard. We've deployed over 10,000 soldiers and airmen to different theaters and different contingencies from Massachusetts. Because of that, I think people are somewhat aware, and much more aware than they were 25 years ago. When I was growing up, the only access I had would be returning Vietnam veterans. There really wasn't any local neighbors or friends who fought in Vietnam. It was always those who had gone on active duty. This day and age, we were mobilized to the North Shore to shovel fire hydrants during what we call the great snowstorms of 2015. And we deploy, if you notice, a lot more than we ever have for domestic emergencies. So I think we're much more aware to children in the population than we have been in the past.
How do we mobilize Americans for decades to come to provide the kind of help and assistance that thousands of families who, like your family, had someone serving overseas and in many cases need assistance of a great variety and will need that assistance for many years to come? How do we continue that effort and really over the long term show our commitment to veterans?
I think, one thing is by doing the things that you're doing today. Part of it is communication, so that people understand what the sacrifice has been for veterans, and how many veterans there are. I know, for example, in the city of Lynn, there are thousands of veterans living in the city, for example. That's true, I think, on the North Shore also. Making sure that people are supportive of the programs that they have, whether it's the Veterans Administration or other programs that support veterans. I know, for example, that the city of Lynn has more than $1 million of direct aid to veterans, and amongst a lot of other support that the agencies give. And most importantly, I think this generation actually is very, very patriotic and very supportive of the military. 25 years ago, if I were going out in uniform, I honestly didn't know what to expect. I could be heckled, I could be criticized. Now that never happens. So there has been an inflection point where there's definitely a difference in patriotic mentality, where people have separated the politics of wars with the actual soldiers fighting it. And hopefully we can build upon that spirit with the citizenry and keep them involved with events such as tomorrow at Lynn Veterans Auditorium and with great events like this.
If you had one wish for Veterans Day tomorrow, what would that be?
My only wish would be, and it's probably true of most holidays, that people who do take it off try to spend a little bit of time going to events, supporting veterans, spending some time thanking a veteran, doing things to understand what Veterans Day means or whatnot. It's sort of, it's nice to have a day off, say for a holiday for those who do. It's nice for the kids to have a day off. It would be wonderful if the kids who had a day off could come to events and thank veterans or hear speakers or really use that to get educated on the history of Veterans Day and the plight of veterans.
This has been a conversation with Army Colonel Michael Feiner, who will be the keynote speaker on Wednesday, Veterans Day, at 11 o'clock at Lynn Veterans Memorial Auditorium in Lynn City Hall. I am Thor Jurgensen, City Editor of the Daily Item. Read all our Veterans Day coverage on itemlive.com and in the Daily Item. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Thor.